himself against Antony and Cleopatra. However, once he had achieved victory on the battlefield, he claimed that all of his actions were aimed at stabilizing the Republic and restoring its traditional institutions, after which he would fade into the background, leaving behind him a reinvigorated republic. Many Romans appear to have bought into this interpretation, at least publicly. For example, speaking of Octavian's actions, the Roman historian Velleius Paterculus wrote, 20 years of civil wars were ended. Foreign wars were suppressed, peace restored. The frenzy of arms everywhere put to rest. Validity was restored to the laws, authority to the courts, and dignity to the Senate. The old traditional form of the Republic was restored. Even a Roman tombstone from the period, in the process of eulogizing the deceased, included, as an aside, the statement, when peace was restored to the world, when the Republic was restored, we began to enjoy peace and prosperity. This course has traced the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and I began it by quoting the famous explanation offered by the Greek historian Polybius to account for Rome's remarkable success in conquering the Mediterranean. He asserted that it was due to the peculiar nature of the Roman mixed constitution, which divided power among three groups, the Senate, the people, and the magistrates, thereby creating a government which beneficially blended together elements of an aristocracy, a democracy, and a monarchy. Furthermore, these three branches of government were interdependent and could serve to check one another. I would like to end by citing another passage from Polybius's history, in which he lays out a grand theory proposing that governments naturally and inevitably evolve through a distinct sequence of different forms. Polybius hypothesizes a cyclical progression of 7 stages, which form an endless loop called anacyclosis. He begins with human beings in a sort of anarchic condition without political structures. Eventually, a strong leader emerges who brings order and direction for the good of all, and thereby gains the respect and fealty of the group. They willingly bestow the mantle of authority upon him, and thus the first king is established, and the first stage of the cycle, kingship. Over time, however, subsequent monarchs start to grow arrogant and to abuse their position of power through arbitrary or unjust actions. And the kingship degenerates into the second phase, tyranny. These outrages provoke a group of the wealthiest and most dynamic men to organize together and ultimately overthrow the tyrant. They then take charge of running the state in a collective fashion, sharing power among themselves. And the third phase, aristocracy, is born. While the initial group acts with the interests of all in mind, once again, over subsequent generations, their descendants become addicted to wealth and status and think only of themselves. And aristocracy degenerates into its corrupt form, oligarchy. The ordinary people grow weary of the abuses of the oligarchs and finally reach a point where they rebel and kill or expel the oligarchs. Recalling their ill treatment first at the hands of the tyrants, then by the oligarchs, they do not wish to reinstate either a kingship or an aristocracy. So, by necessity, they themselves take up the reins of government and create a democracy. Equality and freedom of speech form two of the cornerstones of this democracy, and for a time, there is harmony and prosperity. But soon, corruption again creeps in. Greed leads to inequality, and affluence fosters a sense of entitlement. Both create resentment among the populace. Unscrupulous leaders arise who play upon these feelings by making extravagant promises, but in reality are only concerned with enhancing their own power. With the rise of these demagogues, democracy devolves into the next phase, mob rule. At some point, either one of the demagogues emerges as dominant over all the others and seizes sole control of the state, or there's a general collapse into anarchy, followed by the emergence of a new strongman, and the entire cycle repeats itself. This is how Polybius described his doctrine of anacyclosis. And in his presentation of it, there is an almost biological inevitability to the way in which each stage degenerates into its negative twin. Innumerable later thinkers, including Aquinas during the Middle Ages, Machiavelli in the Renaissance, and Enlightenment figures such as John Adams, all repeated versions of it. Keep in mind, Polybius himself lived at the height of the success of the Roman Republic in the 2nd century BC, not during the late Republic when it was actually collapsing. Polybius optimistically believed that the Romans had solved the puzzle of how to stop the perpetual cycle. And they did this by crafting a constitution that mixed together elements of all three of the positive forms of government: kingship, aristocracy, and democracy. He believed that by blending these three forms together at the same time in the same government, the Romans had found a way to arrest their decay and to avoid the perils of their negative manifestations: tyranny, oligarchy, and mob rule. As we've seen, however, the Roman solution was not permanent, and the Republic did eventually collapse, falling into chaotic mob rule, witnessing the rise of demagogues and ultimately resulting in the establishment of a new monarch-like figure in the form of Octavian. Thus, it might appear as if Rome's mixed constitution only temporarily managed to arrest the turning of the anacyclosis wheel, and that in the end, the Roman Republic fell prey to all the usual ills predicted by Polybius' scheme. The twin questions that bookend this course, what explains the rise of Rome and why did the Roman Republic fall, sound like simple ones. But finding satisfactory answers to them has remained elusive for the last 2,000 years, and likely will continue to do so in the future. If it is not possible to definitively answer these questions, however, it is certainly possible to gain a deeper understanding of the factors and processes that led to the Republic's rise and fall, and that is what I've tried to present over the course of these lectures. As a concluding note, it's worth considering the long shadow that the memory of the Roman Republic has cast over subsequent Western civilization, and the strong influence that is wielded over recent history. Perhaps the most important manifestation of this influence in the last few centuries has been by serving as a direct inspiration for both the American and French revolutions, and for the republics which each country set up in their aftermaths. The American and French revolutions and republics define modern notions of liberty and citizenship, and they drew directly on the Roman Republic for inspiration and form. In the last 2 decades of the 18th century, the government of France went through an accelerated version of the ancient Roman Republic's collapse and fall. Just like Rome, France transitioned from monarchy to a republic via revolution, and created magistrates bearing the names senator, consul, and tribune. In ancient Rome, Julius Caesar and Octavian then rose up as popular leaders in the system, first stretching its institutions by holding multiple consulships and triumvirates, and then supplanting it and assuming one-man control over the state under the titles dictator for life and emperor. This was the same arc followed in France by Napoleon Bonaparte, who similarly began as a military leader and then ascended to political power in France, holding a series of invented offices that bore the thoroughly Roman names consul, first consul, consul for life, and finally emperor. As we've seen, the founding fathers of the American Republic were also inspired in innumerable ways by the Roman Republic, and quite self-consciously thought of themselves as an improved version of it. Currently, the political experiment of the American Republic is well into its third century of existence, and while the respective histories and contexts of ancient Rome and the United States are too dissimilar to make direct comparisons, one can hope that the failure of the Roman Republic may at least suggest some of the dangers and flaws that such republics can potentially fall victim to.